Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Parks and Restoration Podcast, the show for parks and conservation professionals that want to up their leadership game and be the better leaders that our current and future generations need us to be. I am Chris Lee, one of your hosts, coming to you from the very frigid east coast of Iowa, where even the Mississippi River is freezing solid.
And I'm Jeremy Yost, part of the Natural Areas Management team here in Pot County, and believe it or not, it's really cold here too.
Yeah, I think it's this cold is reaching everywhere. Anyway, if you're listening and you are freezing in the cold, just know that our thoughts and condolences are with you. If you're like me and just loathe this kind of weather, just remember there's only 3 months until reliably warmer weather is coming. So at least for those of us here in the Midwest. All right. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I call organizational ecology. This is the foundation of the stuff that I talk about in my leadership trainings, in workshops that I do, and my other business that I do as a leadership consultant. And I thought I'd just have a chat with Jeremy. We could get into the origins of where that came from. I am keynoting the Iowa County Conservation Employees Association Winterfest conference, probably the day that this airs, I do believe. And so some of that I talk about there in that keynote and in the breakout session I'm going to do at that conference will kind of run parallel with what we talk about here. But I guess, Jeremy, you worked here. This was several years back now. I don't even know how long you've been gone. It's too long. I know that. But I can... let me ask you this. How would you say, if at all, I have changed in terms of leadership or management or leading people since you've been here?
Yeah, I think I have noticed, at least from my removed perspective, that it seems like you have changed a lot over time. You know, in our last podcast, you may have heard that thought of like people would come in and like, oh, Chris is intimidating or he's a little scary. Like, back in my day, there was still a little bit of that hanging on, but I've definitely seen across his leadership journey, it's definitely been a bit of a change. So let's go back in history. Like what kind of spurred you on to make that change?
Well, I think the big one, we'll go all the way back. So I went into this line of work, and we talk about this in previous episodes. I went into this line of work because the outdoors and natural resources are critically important to me as a person. Growing up, the outdoors were my refuge. Specifically the Mississippi River bottoms where I grew up, where I still have land in the duck hunting club that I grew up in. We got about 300 acres of bottomland, maple and cottonwood forest, and some backwater sloughs and lakes, and it was just it was really a Huck Finn type paradise for a young guy growing up. I could just go down there as a young teenager and I could disappear into the backwaters, into the swamps, and be gone for an entire weekend, come back just long enough to restock up on Mountain Dew and maybe some snacks out of the fridge real quick, and then jump back on the four-wheeler and disappear back into the swamps. And it was just the greatest thing because, you know, I've had my share of emotional struggles and things like that. And I could go and disappear into those woods and just know that they were always there for me. And I think probably by the time I hit high school, I knew that I wanted to go into some sort of work that was going to keep me connected to the outdoors. And it took me a while to really understand that I wanted to give those kind of opportunities back to other people in my community, to future generations, specifically people in my community, because, you know, that this Burlington area is really where I call home. And I always wanted to come back here, and I was lucky enough to do that pretty early on in my career.
Do you think there was a time where you went from like realizing that you had all of that access to private land, and then like there was this moment of like, oh, not everyone has this privilege?
Yeah, it was. I can't say there was one defining moment. It was kind of a growing awareness over time. Once I moved back here and got the job with Des Moines County Conservation, I started out as a natural resource manager. And then within a couple of years, I moved up into operations supervisor. And it was really then that I got to see the people in the parks and really understand kind of where they were coming from. I would see people come to our nature center programs and they're like, yeah, I'm from in town and this is my only opportunity to come and connect with these kind of places. And I love coming out here, this, Stars Cave Nature Center and Stars Cave Park and Preserve, where a lot of our programs are hosted. It's like, man, this place is so cool. I love driving out here from town. And it really made it clear that, wow, I was incredibly fortunate to have what I had growing up. And a lot of people, and more so as we become more and more urbanized, don't have that. And that became one of the big driving forces of all right, public lands are important. The quality of parks and the accessibility of parks is critically important. And so that became a driving force for me. And I was so gung ho and hard charging about, we've got to acquire these lands. We've got to create these parks. We've got to build these parks. We've got to create these amenities. We've got to provide for these people that are relying on us. We've got to provide for future generations. We've got to connect people to the outdoors. We've got to make this impact. And that was kind of my motivation for wanting to rise up into management roles is, all right, now I can kind of lead the organization or lead the team that's going to do that.
And before that, I know you're a biologist. So before that moment of like realizing that you're connecting people, was your driving force more like really the ecological management side of it?
Yeah, and that's a good insight. And those two things go hand in hand, don't they?
Right.
And so, yeah, I started my career as a wildlife biologist, and my job was to help landowners get, basically more wildlife on their property. And so it was habitat improvements. And so I would connect them with programs and things like that. And so in that respect, it was conserving the natural resources. I was looking at it from the perspective of wildlife species, and bobwhite quail were the big focus. I was in Northeast Missouri, and Missouri had a huge focus on bobwhite quail. And so there was all these programs that were created to stem the decline of the quail populations. And, and it was really just a product of changing landscapes and just modern times, how landscapes were changing. And so, yeah, it did start as a focus on that because the natural places, the natural resources, the wild places were so important to me. And so that was a way of giving back in that respect. But that was I always wanted to come back home and give back to my community and to the natural resources of my community. And I was natural resource manager here in Des Moines County for only a couple of years. And then I moved up into the operations supervisor role, which was both parks and natural resource focus. And that was kind of where it turned then to we're conserving natural resources, and we're doing the habitat improvements and the land management for wildlife, but we're also doing it, managing these parks, creating these places, these amenities for people. And there's that balance. And anybody that works in county conservation or state parks or almost any parks type agency out there understands this balance. And then we've had to talk about it before too, of like, where is that balance, and there is no right answer to that. Obviously, it's going to just depend on people's perspectives and their priorities. And so that's always been a kind of an interesting thing to juggle. But yeah, it was natural resources and parks. And it was ultimately, there is no sustaining natural resources unless you've got the humans willing to do so. Because certainly here in Iowa, being the most altered landscape pretty much on the face of the planet, certainly in the United States though, that without people being willing to conserve those natural resources, there's going to be an issue there, right?
It ends up coming back to people and really trying to like build that team around you. And so go back to that kind of shift for you when you went from just focusing on natural resource management to getting into having to work with parks and people.
Yeah. So moving up from the natural resource manager role into the operations supervisor role, that's what really brought in the parks aspect of it. So as natural resource manager, a lot of what I did was, like you said, planted the prairies, the CRP contracts that local landowners would sign up for. They would hire us to go out there and plant them. And so it was oftentimes long days in the tractor putting prairie grasses into the ground. And that does require people willing to sign up for those programs, right? And put conservation on their lands. And then moving into the operations supervisor role, now my job became overseeing the entire field staff. So it was both the natural resource management and the parks management and the people assigned to both things. And it's not a big group. The field team at the time was a sum total of 4 people. But it brought in the parks aspect of it. And that was where my shift, like I said, really started to change from I need to go create the habitat, I need to go create the the natural resources, the ecosystems, conserve the species, to I need to connect people with the places that have those species on them so that those people then care about those species, so those people care about these wild places, and they can get out and connect in whatever way it is that they want to with the natural world. And so as I started doing that really kind of, it was another aspect, while it was interlinked, it was another aspect of the passion that I had for this line of work. And that passion really started to grow, especially since I was connecting people in my own community with those natural places. You know, I was creating the community assets for my community members, for my friends, my family, the community that has supported me growing up. And so there was an intrinsic sense of accomplishment there as well. And that's the great thing about county conservation is, and a lot of conservation too, whether you're in municipal parks or even in state parks, if you're in a place that's, you know, that you call home, conservation is so localized. You know, that park is such an important thing, that wild area, whatever it is, that public land is such an important thing for that community. And I saw that and I felt that, and I wanted more and more of it. And but it was self-serving. It was, you know, I wanted to create these places. I wanted to make this impact. I wanted to move up into a management position so that I could make a bigger impact and I could have a team behind me and together we could make a bigger impact. But yet it was still my motivation, right? And when I get fixated on something, or when I get jazzed up about something, I can get pretty intense, as you've seen.
The reason that you decided to continue to move up, and I think it's really respectable that, you know, a driving force has always been connecting back to your community. But as you were taking on that director role and thinking about dig into the idea of like your idea of leadership as you stepped up into that role.
Yeah. So I agonized quite a bit about going after the director job when I realized it was going to open up. Interestingly, I had previously applied for a director job when the long serving director retired. I was still living in Missouri, working down there. Um, and the director had been there for 30 years or whatever. And he was a family friend. He was also part of my duck hunting club. So I knew him, and he was retiring. And so I had applied for the director job at the time. And I thank my lucky stars I did not get it then, because I don't know that I would have lasted. I think had I taken that job then, knowing now what I know about being in an administrative role, I was in no way ready for it. And so, frankly, I'm glad I did not get it then. And the person that they hired was the environmental education manager at the time, and I knew her. And so, you know, she took over the director role, and then just as fate would have it, she ended up moving away and out to, I think she moved to Kansas or something. But anyway, just life took her in another direction, and that was going to open up the director role. And I'd been in management for a couple of years, and ultimately I decided that if I was going to keep increasing the impact that I could have on my community, on the natural resources, on the parks, I was going to have to move up into a higher role. And sure, you move up into a higher role, there's more money and benefits and stuff, but really the driving force was the impact that I could make. And I knew that even as the field supervisor, I was limited on what I could do. But if I moved into the director role, now not only could I just impact the parks, but I could also impact the environmental education division and the department as a whole. And so that was kind of motivation of, wow, I could really grow my impact here and bring some vision to this department, and the impact that this can have on my community could be enormous. And I got excited about that. And so I went after it, and it turns out I got the job. And be careful what you wish for, right?
I think a really a cool theme there is a thing that you said that, you know, you realized throughout this journey that, you know, you got the director position at the right time for you to continue that growth. And I think it's an important message some younger people out there, or even people in the middle of their career thinking about moving up, that, if you don't get that at that time, maybe it just wasn't right. It wasn't the right time for you. And you just need to continue your growth path along your journey. Speaking of growth, as you got the director position and you started along this path, let's dig into where you felt that change and you were able to actually start to think about the team around you, not just like what was that change in your leadership?
Yeah. So moving into the director role, that's an interesting dynamic because going from a colleague and yeah, I was the field supervisor, so the field team technically I was their manager, but even that's a very different role than being the director. And so now everyone that works for the department I'm responsible for. Suddenly, rather than just being colleagues, they're my employees. So that dynamic changes things a little bit. And I definitely felt that because now I'm responsible for their performance and all of that. And I took the management classes. So, you're stepping into a role, and I don't remember when it was, but I signed up for a couple of these management classes and supervisory 101 or whatever it is. They host through the local college, or they've always got those associations that host these things. And I took those, and it was all about how to do performance evaluations and disciplinary procedures and documenting and all that. Management is not leadership, though.
Exactly.
And I cannot emphasize this enough. Anybody can be a leader. It does not matter the role you have or the title you hold. Anybody can be a leader. And you saw it. Pat Rogie, he ended up becoming the operations supervisor after I vacated the role. And then a few years later, but he was the park ranger for a long, long time. That guy was a leader. Now, he will never admit it, but people gravitated to him. People they would follow that guy into battle. It did not matter what they were doing. They were going to follow. He had that dynamic. And the funny thing is, we would butt heads over that. As I became director, I flagged him on some performance evaluations of like, Pat, you've got to slow down. Like you need to focus. I need you to like come up with priority lists. Like, you got to prioritize the work. Like, we can't just be showing up to work in the morning and be like, what are we going to do today? Oh, I don't know. I think we're just going to go do that. Like we have these systems. I've built these systems. I need you to use them. And I need you to document and that's just not who he was. And we would argue about that. And I just found myself like,
you were basically trying to, like, get him to be a manager and, like, that
yeah,
idea of how you were managing. And absolutely, Pat, if you're out there listening, I love you. I miss you. I hope you go and visit even more waterfalls. But, like, exactly, he was, like, the definition of, like, he didn't want to be the manager. He didn't want to, like, set the priority, but, like, literally that person could lead anyone and to do anything.
yeah, yeah. If we had interns and they were given the option of who to go work with, it was going to be him. And I knew this because I was an intern prior to ever coming to work at the department, and it was absolutely that. I mean, he was one of the big reasons that I always wanted to come back and work for this department. One, it was home, but two, like, that guy was there. Like, you wanted to work with him, and I didn't see that for what it was early on. And so I came into it with this management mindset of the work and the accomplishments and the goals and the to-do lists and the tasks and all of that. That was the priority. It was what we got done was the priority. And that was kind of why I came into it. Like, man, if I'm going to be the director, I could have an influence on this department. I could set direction. I could set the strategy. And yeah, it was a very collaborative thing. I mean, you remember our vision quest that we went on, and
Right.
Everybody had a say in the direction that we were going and kind of the tasks, but and the overall kind of, project and trajectory of the department. But ultimately, as the director, you're kind of setting the priorities, right? So I was so focused on that because I was just so driven to do these great things, and it was coming from a good place. Like, I wanted to create these amazing parks. Like, we were in the middle of building Big Hollow recreation area and adding all these amenities right before I got hired on first time got hired on as natural resource manager, they had just finished the lake. This lake was 50 years in the making, or 60 years in the making. And they had just finished 2008. We've talked about this on previous episodes. I think the first dreams for it came in the late 1960s, and they finally finished the lake in 2008, same year I got hired on. And so now it's like we got to add the campgrounds, we got to add the cabins, and all these other things that we've promised the people that we're going to have. And it was just like, go, 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 go! Come on, we're going to do this. And I was so focused on that I didn't stop to look at the people that would make that happen. I didn't take the time to understand them. I didn't take the time to see, okay, how can I match their unique skills and strengths and interests and the things that give them energy? How can I match that to what we want to accomplish broadly as a department? It was just like, here's what we're going to do. Get on board. And, if you're not living up to my standards, you're going to hear about it. And they would hear about it.
It's like this whole story is like exactly what we talked about before about the what got you here won't get you there. Like I know that
Yeah.
in all of the other things that you did before, like you are a doer, even though on the 6 types of working genius, like you're a WI, but when you're so driven to accomplish that thing that you believe in, you're just like, we have to do this, 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 and we have to get these things done. And so I think it's great that we're going through this whole journey of going from this place of like you were driven by what got you there, but then you're having right in the middle of the story here, you're having this moment of like, I have to figure out what's going to get me there as a true leader.
Yeah. And so that takes us to the epiphany moment, I guess, that we talked about in a previous episode. It was, one of those moments that it was one of those come to Jesus talks with some staff. And Pat, I believe, was operations supervisor at the time. And so he sat in on it. And, I think they had requested the meeting. I don't remember exactly how we ended up in this situation, but whatever it was, one of those tough discussions of like, things aren't going right. There has to be some changes made, or there's going to be consequences, da, 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 da. And, they come out and I said, what is really happening here? What seems to be the problem? And that was when they said, Chris, you can be intimidating. And at the time, I didn't see it for what it was. It was only upon reflection, and this is almost every epiphany I've ever had in my life comes after the fact, when I actually take the time to reflect on something, that I was like, oh my God, I never, ever went into this line of work, into any line of work, to lead or to manage from a place of fear. If anyone had said, write down the qualities that you bring as a manager or as a leader, making my people fearful, would never have made that list. And it would have made the list of the things that disqualify people as leaders or managers. And here I'm being told that I'm bringing that to this department, this place that I love, this community that I love, these people, frankly, that I do love. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? And so then, it's like the hero's journey. Okay, now I'm second guessing whether I'm even qualified to have this role. Like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't, maybe I am not ready to be director. Maybe I shouldn't be director. Maybe I should demote myself out of director and go back to being operations supervisor, but that ship has already sailed. Maybe I should just quit this line of work altogether, and I should just go work construction or something where leading from places of fear is absolutely expected. But I at some point, I kind of remember the day, actually. It was in that same place. So in our old office, we had this wildlife area, this like 50-acre wildlife area back behind our office. And there's this little trail that you can walk back, and there's this old ass shelter house back there by a pond. And so we had that tough meeting there when I was told I was intimidating. It was actually there on that spot. And I would go back there to think sometimes, like, if I just needed a break from the office and stuff, I would walk back there and just clear my head a little bit. And I walked back there one day, and I laid down on this picnic table underneath the shelter house. I'm just staring up at the shelter house, questioning whether I'm qualified to do this job. And I was like, you know what? I just want to go back to being a natural resource manager. I just want to go back to managing lands and helping wildlife thrive, because clearly I am not qualified to help people thrive. And then that got my brain turned of, what if those are one and the same thing? What if the thing that made me a good wildlife biologist, or the thing that made me a good natural resource manager, is the thing that I could bring to my role as the leader of this department? what if this concept of creating the conditions for things to thrive is universal? And this idea started percolating. And at the time, I didn't fully flesh it out, but the seed started to germinate in my brain of, when you're managing land, say for quail, like I did when I was working in Missouri, you didn't pass a policy or an administrative rule or a 10-point strategic plan and post it on the trees or in the prairies and get the quail to do something. You didn't go out and command the quail to go do the thing that you wanted them to do. You didn't say, quail, make more of yourself because your population is declining. You didn't say, set up on this property versus that one because there's hunters over here that want to hunt you. And there's no command and control when it comes to wildlife. What you do is you create the conditions, right? Like you create the habitat, you manage the ecosystem, and you create the conditions for your target species to thrive, and then everything else comes as a result of that. And that is what I now know, or what I now call organizational ecology. It's taking that concept, this whole idea of creating the conditions for a thing to thrive and the results coming from that, and applying that to our organizations. And so I started the shift of, what if instead of focusing on the to-do lists and the tasks and the projects, what if I focused what if as a leader I focused on creating the best place to work? What if I focused on making sure that the people that worked here were, one, the right people for this role, and two, had the resources they need, and they were taken care of, and they had the conditions for them to thrive uniquely as they are, as individuals and as people? What if I focused on that and then made everything else subservient to that? And with that shift, everything started to change.
So as you're making that shift, what does that actually look like? What are the conditions that you're setting up?
So it's a lot, but in my talks, I have it broken down into, I call it the 5 Ps of a thriving organization. So if you imagine this, a tree, right? So imagine a great big bur oak tree standing out there, stalwart in the prairie, got that big canopy, and you overlay a triangle on the canopy there. So top of the triangle at the point is people. Bottom left of this triangle up in the canopy there is perspective. Bottom right of the triangle is purpose. And then the trunk itself, that is proactive. And then the roots are process. So when you bring those things together, what you get is, all right, your people are your number one focus. That's at the top. That is the energy of your organization. So if I went to the board of supervisors and they said, you know what, we're feeling generous, we are going to double. No, you know what, we're going to triple your budget. Like, hell yeah. But you have to get rid of half your people. I'm not taking that deal. I don't know that there's an administrator out there or a leader out there or anyone out there who's going to take that deal, especially in our line of work, because the only way we provide stuff is through the people that we have to provide it, right? So for the purposes of this, I'm just going to focus is on the people. So what does that look like? Well, one, it's recognizing that everyone is different. So it's getting back to, what is it that your people find energy in? And this, I guess, would touch on that purpose thing. Is, so if you take people, which is at the top point of the triangle, and purpose, which is the bottom right of this triangle, that line in between them is fulfillment. So when you connect people with what they uniquely find, what their purpose is, they'll find fulfillment. That is energy in an ecosystem. It's just like the sunlight, just like when you clear cedar trees, you're allowing sunlight, you're allowing energy to reach down into those dormant native remnant prairie species. And then they flourish, right? They thrive. Same thing applies to people. So my job as the leader is to find out, what is it that drives my people? What do they find energy in? What is their element when they are doing their thing, that thing that they can do that they just get lost in, and that their lives would be less valuable, their lives would be miserable without this thing that they do. Like if I told you, you can never bird hunt again. Like,
I actually had this the other day. There was this thing on a podcast that said you can have enough money that you can never work again, but you can never hunt or fish again. And I had like a honest, like come to Jesus moment with myself. And I'm like, I don't think I would take the deal.
No. Hell no. Absolutely not. No. And I think that is true for most people out there. We just don't know it because society says your quality of life is measured on the money that you have or the things that you have, the shit that you can buy. And we're sold this bill of goods that like just getting more and more and more and more and more is going to make you happier. And it's just, and every time you get to the next level, it moves the goalpost. And so if we really just take a step back and say, okay, when am I the happiest? When am I the most fulfilled? When am I in my element? And that was the term that we couldn't come up with, I think, when we talked about that one, like their thing, right? I was calling it their thing. It's your element. Sir Ken Robinson, he's got the most popular TED Talk of all time on, I think it's called How Schools Kill Creativity. He wrote this book called The Element. And it's really about that of like, what is that thing that you do that you just absolutely could not live without? Like all the money in the world, you would not give this thing up because your life would be less satisfying without this thing. And so my job as leader is to find that and then to help my people cultivate their lives around that. So for instance, I've got a guy that his thing is racing. All right. He drives a sprint car. Been driving a sprint car since like before he could legitimately drive on roads, right? He's been racing. And races oftentimes are on Friday nights. So we build his schedule around his race schedule. Like, okay, there are some Fridays you're just going to take off. Or we're going to shift your schedule to allow you to work 410s Monday through Thursday so that you have Friday off to get your car ready for Saturday night's race or whatever it is. Because without that thing in his life, he's going to be less satisfied. And if work gets in the way of that thing, then that dissatisfaction is going to be transposed onto work.
Right. Like I think at the beginning of your career, you would have been like, no, you can't take Fridays off.
Absolutely.
We have this thing that has to be done. There's this thing that like, we just have to do it. You have to put work first.
Yeah. Our schedule is 7 to 3:30. And you know what? We'll work around it as long as you work 7 to 3:30. And then, you can do that, or you can take PTO. That's fine. But you gotta apply and it has to be approved. But no, hell no. Or like, it's just and I'm sure some managers or organization leaders will listen to this and be like, oh my God, you're just rolling over and you're letting them walk all over you. I guarantee it does not work that way. This guy that we allow him to build his race schedule for, one of the things I had to bring up in his performance evaluation, take more time off work. He doesn't take time off. Like he lives for this work because work takes care of him, right? Like he's towing up against that point where he's maxed out on his PTO and he's going to start losing some, like his accruals are just going to stop. And, I'm like, it's okay to take some time off. He's like, why would I do that? I like coming here.
Right. It's just like, this is the perfect example of that you built this culture, you built this ecology, you built this place that this person wants to be so much. You allow them to take Fridays off, just like when you're managing for quail. If you set out those conditions that they need, they're going to live there and they're always going to be there. They're not going to the next
Absolutely.
farm to go get food or shelter or water or anything. You've created the conditions that they need to thrive.
Exactly. And that's really what it comes down to is just it's taking this concept of ecosystem principles and applying it to the human ecosystem. And in our workplaces, I mean, they are just an ecosystem. It's the habitat that you're showing up to from 7 to 3:30 every day or 6 to 4 or whatever it happens to be during race season. And so that's, I guess that's the people in perspective or the people and purpose side of things.
There are 5 P's. So what do we connect to the next one? What's the next P?
So on the left side of the triangle would be people at the top and then perspective on the left. So when those two things come together, the line that stands between those 2 points is connection. And I spend a lot of time talking about this in my talks because I of all the things that we as humans need, that is numero uno. We have to know that we are part of a tribe and that the people around us have our backs and that we are expected to have theirs and that we are contributors to the tribe. And this overlaps with purpose a little bit because it's hard to find meaning in something that isn't benefiting other humans. So, that's why it's triangle and everything is connected. But so on this one, for instance, I had this situation one time where I had a park ranger and uh, he we sent him out to go do some sort of task. I think it was to replace a sign. And maybe you remember from when you were here, the way our big like rule signs are, they're set in these. So we have 6x6 posts that come up. So those are the verticals, and then 6x6 as the horizontals. And you take the top one off, and then the sign slides down in a groove, so that once you put the top crosspiece back on, you can't take the sign out without disassembling the frame. Right? That's how we keep the signs from being stolen. And one of them got shot or something like that. Who knows? But sent him out to replace it. And it's more than one person's job, but he went out solo to do it and struggled with it. Ended up taking the new sign and just like running screws through the new sign into the framework and just like slap the sign on the outside of the framework. And I hear about this through other employees. This is way back. And I hear about this through other employees, and they're like, what the hell? Like, and this was one of a series of things that had happened. So I was like, first reaction is like, oh, hell no. Like, all right, here we go. Come to Jesus time. Like, going to have a sit down, and we're going to talk about what our expectations are and performance. And, we're going to put on the manager hat here. And then I thought, no, wait, hold on. People first, and then perspective. I'm not seeing the world through his eyes. I don't know what he's dealing with outside of work. Frankly, I don't know what he's dealing with inside of work because I don't see these guys every day, right? I mostly sit in the office and deal with spreadsheets. And so I pulled him aside and I sat him down and I said, hey, how are you doing? And first reaction was like, fine. And I'm going to say this in the keynote on Tuesday, the same day this comes out, so I don't mind saying it now. Fine is probably the worst 4-letter word we can let other humans around us use. And I said, no, really. How are you really doing? What's going on? And I don't know that I'll ever forget this. When he realized that I was legitimately asking, that I had a legitimate concern about what was actually going on, like I just saw him just deflate. And he's like, a lot. And he started telling me about all these things that he was dealing with outside of work. And it was this laundry list of bullshit that this guy was having to carry around with him. And it showed up in his work performance, and now it doesn't let him off the hook. You still got to perform at work. There's no getting around that. But I could have walked in there and said, dude, you screwed up the sign. And here's all the other things that the team has said that you're screwing up. And I'm, I need you to do better. I'm going to put you on this performance improvement plan. And what would I be doing there? I'm just going to add some other thing to the weight he's carrying around. But instead, I took this perspective of everybody is dealing with shit we don't know about. Everyone. I don't care if they seem to be the happiest person on earth. Everybody is dealing with something. And we like to think that there's this concept of work-life balance. And I was very much of this opinion early in my career of like, you do work at work and you do life at life, and they do not intersect, and you can leave your damn emotions at the door. I don't care what you're dealing with at home. We got a job to do. And that's absolutely not how humans work. Like whatever you're dealing with at home, you're going to bring to work, and whatever you're dealing with at work, you're going to bring home. And that ripple effect is going to be enormous in both places. And so what I didn't want to do was just pile something else on. And so we had this conversation and like, man, dude, is there any way I can help? Is there any resources I can provide? I still need you to get that sign fixed. Like you still got to go fix that sign. But I'm not going to jump your ass for screwing it up because, I didn't know, man. And do you need some time off or whatever? It was putting the person first. And I think that was the right call on that one. And I've tried to bring that into everything else that I've done. It's very hard to do. And it's, we get so focused on the what, but we really need to focus first on the who and what they're carrying around with them, because everybody's carrying something.
And it only takes, it's important to keep in mind here that it's proven that it only takes 7 minutes of real one-on-one conversation to make a difference in someone's life. Not just and that's going to pay dividends, not just in their life, but back around to their work output as well. And so, it may take longer than that, but at a minimum, it only takes 7 minutes to make that real difference.
Yeah.
So let's connect that down to the fourth P, the proactive. Let's get down to the trunk of the tree.
Yeah. So, so taking down to the trunk of the tree. So being proactive is all about recognizing that what you do is well, and it's tied to process. So we're going to do proactive and process together because you can't really do one without the other. Proactive is really about taking the processes that you put in place. So, for instance, the story that I just told, one of the processes that I've tried to just implement for myself is before I before I react, is just building in a little bit of gap between stimulus and response, right? And this goes back to the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. If you have not read this book, everybody should read this book. We can't be friends until you've read this book. I gave this book to Jeremy because I found out he didn't read the book, and I'm like, we can't be friends until you read this book. These are just universal principles you have to know. So between stimulus and response.
I was just staring at that book on the bookshelf today, like thinking about
Yeah.
that it's like,
Yeah.
we can't be friends.
Exactly. We can't. I'm sorry. So this is one of the big points in there is it's called be proactive, right? And he says that there's a gap between stimulus and response. It's so oftentimes we get the stimulus and we just jump to our response, and that gap is almost non-existent. And so, like in this instance, I hear that my guy screwed up this park sign, and like that's just stupid. Like how much these signs cost, and you just drilled holes through it. Like I wanted to jump to manager mode and be like, damn it, what the hell? But one of my processes that I have in place is widen that gap between stimulus and response. Even if it's just a matter of when you're in the moment, take a deep breath or whatever it is, maybe, what, we'll talk about this tomorrow and let me have time to stew on it. Just building that gap between there. And the whole idea of being proactive is taking that time to then formulate not a reaction, but a response. Reactive would have been coming in swinging and be like, you just screwed this all up, and then just piling more shit on this guy's shoulders. But the response was something very, very different. And so that's where it really comes down to what you do as a leader. Leadership is not a title you hold. It's not your position of power. Leadership is what you do. And that's really where proactive is all about. It's taking that time to do the things that then cultivate the whole ecosystem. And so in my programs, one of the things I talk about is doing one-on-one time with your team. And this is probably one of the most important things that I do, because that's one, it builds connection. And Gallup has found, a polling organization, I think it's only like 23% of employees trust the leadership of their organization. I think that's the actual number. And I'm like, it's 2026. I think the statistics from 2024, whatever. And that's the best we can do. That's the best we could do. That is absurd to me. And so when you put these processes in place, and when you take the time to implement them, and so one-on-one time with your team is one of the greatest things you could do to build connection, to build trust, because there is no high functioning organization without trust. And so I've said it in previous episodes. I'll take my team out to lunch 2, 3, 4 times a year, just one-on-one, and we'll shoot the breeze. This is how I find out what makes them tick. This is ways that I find out some of the crap they're dealing with at home, some of the struggles that they're likely to bring to work with them, so that the next time somebody screws up a park sign, I can be like, okay, how's that thing going that you told me you were dealing with, and it makes your organization less of an organization and more of a human-centric ecosystem. And when you have that, people start looking forward to getting up every day and coming to work. They look forward to working with the people that they work around. This doesn't necessarily mean everybody's going to get along or that they're all going to be drinking buddies, but it does mean that they're going to have respect for each other, that they recognize that they can be themselves. There's this psychological safety that if they have something they're dealing with, they don't necessarily have to give details, but they can come out and say, look, I'm dealing with something. I'm probably not on my A game, and recognize that everybody around them will be like, we got your back, whatever you need, we got you. And let's face it, this isn't the best paying job out there. Nobody that works in the world of conservation is making what they could make working in finance or real estate or pretty much any other industry out there. Nobody's doing it for the money. But if I can create the type of place that people want to come work at, and they feel good about being a part of something bigger than themselves, tying back to that purpose thing and the why that you talk about all the time, that really, it doesn't completely make up for the lack of pay. I've had a bunch of people leave for better pay, and they should, take care of your family. And I have the standing rule that, hey, if any of my employees come across an opportunity that is better for them and their family, I'm going to be their greatest reference. I'm going to cry as they walk out the door, but my priority is them. I'll find another employee if I have to, but I'm not going to be that person that says you have to work here, or God forbid, I'm going to blackball you, if you try to go somewhere else or something like that, because my priority is them first. Because only when you do that, then does the productivity come. When people feel that their workplace, that their organization, that their leadership cares for them, you can bet damn well that they will bend over backwards to do good things for that organization, that they will bust their ass to meet those productivity goals. They will go the extra mile to work on that grant deadline over the weekend so that they hit the Monday deadline or whatever it is. They're going to be there and they're going to perform. And that only comes as a product of the ecosystem that you create.
Exactly. Well, there you go, folks. We got to go through and understand some of Chris's history and really understand the inner workings of how Chris has come to this idea of ecosystem management. It's not just for quail, it's for your people too. And, hopefully we're riding along with you in the car right now to Winterfest, to our county conservation folks, and all the other people out there too. We're glad that we got to ride along with you, either in the car or the tractor. But if you are going to Winterfest, some of these same things will be in Chris's his keynote, as well as one of his breakout sessions. So look forward to that to learn more.
Yeah, for sure. And if you want to bring these concepts into your own organization or into your own life, number one, sign up and join our leadership community, our next level leadership community, because this is kind of the roots of what that leadership community is all about. It's just helping us become better leaders. How do we create better organizations, better cultures at our places? And if you want to bring it to your organization, I am for hire. So I'm happy to come do a training or a workshop with you.
And don't forget to find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. And if you're at Winterfest this week, we do have a booth. So make sure to stop by and say hi.
Absolutely. This has been the Parks and Restoration Podcast, the show for parks and conservation professionals that want to be better leaders for current and future generations. I thank you for all you do out there, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.